And welcome back, everybody, to our weekly interview segment on Around the Bases with Bubba and Mo. This week, we're going to talk some Atlanta Braves baseball, and not a better day to do it than Ronald Acuna Day. It should be a national holiday, at least in the Atlanta area. And in order to do so, we are joined by a member of the Talking Shop SB Nation page on SB Nation for the Braves. Find him on Twitter at Talking Shop, and his name is Kris Willis. He's on Twitter at Kris_Willis. Kris, how are we doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good. Thanks for joining us to talk about the Braves. And we were joking right before we started, when we set this up, we didn't even think Acuna would be up yet. So this works out even better. And we will definitely get to him in a minute. But first things first, Jose Bautista is one of the many older free agents that hadn't signed yet, and the Braves signed him to a minor league deal. I guess he's supposed to be coming up to play third base here maybe as soon as, a week or so. What are you seeing with him, and how does that really affect Austin Riley, who's having a good start to the minor league season?
It's a good question. The feeling I've got is we might even see Bautista this weekend. They fast tracked him up to Gwinnett, and he's playing there. I think there's a good chance he may actually make his Braves debut in Philadelphia this weekend. But as far as Austin Riley, I don't think it affects him a whole lot. I think the plan pretty much for Riley was, probably to spend most of this season in the minors. He's at AA Mississippi now. He'll eventually move up to Gwinnett because he's tearing AA up right now. So, Bautista, I think it's just a flyer. He's got a history with Alex Anthopoulos. The Braves are short on power. They hope Ronald Acuna is going to help with that. He probably will. But Bautista hit 23 home runs last year. The rest of the numbers were a little ugly. They're hoping that, there's a little bounce back there. But I think it's just more of a flyer than anything, just to see if there's anything left there. But I think going forward, I still think we might see Austin Riley in September. And I think he'll go to spring training next year with a chance to win the job or possibly be in an Acuna-like situation where he begins the season in the minors, but at some point gets a shot at third base.
All right, let's get to the big news of the day, Kris. Ronald Acuna getting called up finally. Obviously raked in the spring, raked last year. Started off slow. I personally think it was because he was pissed that he didn't make the team out of the gate, but we all know that's the Kris Bryant syndrome. So just talk about him full circle. He's going to add a lot of spark to that team. He's already above 500. And where does he go in the lineup to start? And maybe by the end of the year, maybe he's up at the top of the lineup.
Yeah, I mean, he's hitting sixth tonight. That's that right-handed power that they're really lacking. And, as good as Preston Tucker played early, he had started to slump in the last week or so. And I think, just getting a guy like Acuna up there, that's a big boost, to the team overall. You got, not only offensively, but defensively on the base pass. This guy's a 5-tool talent, and it just took off last year. We knew he was on our radar a little bit, but I've never, since I've been doing this, I've never seen a prospect kind of rise through the Braves system the way he did, and got better at every level. So, just really excited to be able to watch this guy every night, because it's been hard to watch this Braves team for the last couple of 3 years, So, it's nice to see everybody excited about it, and I think he's going to just be a big part of that.
Yeah, no, and it was a rough couple of years, but we have to think about the big picture here, and that was the rebuild that's been taking place, is still kind of taking place, and we'll get to more of that coming up. And a big part of that rebuild is Acuna, obviously, but you have some very good young arms in the system. We know Luis Cajara, we saw a little bit last year. He rehabbed this past weekend. He's real close to coming back. You got Matt Soroka, who's just tearing up AAA right now. What are are those the only two we get to look forward to maybe this year, or what's the plan for the young arms in the system? Kyle Wright, you guys drafted out of Vandy, a lot of good young talent down there.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I mean, Gohara and Soroka are obviously the two big names there. Kyle Wright's at Mississippi. There was some indication, there was some thought early in spring, that if he performs well, he could get possibly fast-tracked a little bit. Colby Allard, everybody kind of soured on him a little bit last year, so I'm waiting to see what he does at Gwinnett. He lost a little bit of velocity, I think, and that brought some of the prospect luster off of him. And then there's Max Fried. Also, that's another young guy there. He's up in the Braves bullpen right now. But at some point you could see him get a rotation, move into that rotation and on a regular basis. So, it's an exciting time. At some point they're going to run out of, they're going to have to answer some questions in that rotation because there's a lot of pitchers there. But it's not something that I feel like they really have to be in that much of a hurry about. It won't hurt anything if two of those guys I mentioned don't see the major leagues until next year. So, but those are the guys I'd focus on. And Wright's one of my favorites. That's a guy I'm really intrigued about. I felt like he probably should have been the number 1 pick in the draft. I was very happy when I saw the Braves get him at number 5. So, it'll be interesting to see how he performs this season.
Yeah, it's all coming together. They, like you said, they have a ton of pitching prospects. And you even mentioned Joey Wentz, who I like a lot, but he's a very young guy, a few years away. They've got Acuna coming up, and now the next guy that's already up and already having a great year is Ozzie Albies. So they've got everything going here. Early in his minor league career, heavy ground ball rate, sort of part of that fly ball revolution now. Do we really think that he's a 20, 25 homer guy consistently, or what do we think there?
Man, I'm a little hesitant on that. I'm not ready to just pencil him in for that. That's another guy. I'm all for the fly ball revolution, and I'm all in on that. But at the same time, I see a guy with the wheels that he's got. I think you're going to see a lot of that gap power and stuff. But I think he's a lot stronger than was advertised coming through the minors, and I think he's developed more probably in the last season and what we've seen early this season, that there is some power there. There is, a 10, 15, 20 home runs probably isn't out of the question for him long term. But, still, I think he's more of a gap guy that's going to, hit a lot of doubles, a lot of triples, and it's going to be in the middle of a lot of things.
Yeah, a guy that will entertain the masses hitting in front of Acuna and Freeman for quite some time. Will be fun to watch a part of that little young core there. We mentioned the pitching and the decisions will have to be made eventually, and I think you're referring to like McCarthy and those guys, the older arms in the staff. Let's talk Mike Foltynewicz, a guy that, the hopes have always been there for him. You see that potential is there for him, but he always seems to slip on a banana peel somewhere along the way. And he started out 2018 he's great right now. 2.77 ERA with a K per 9 of almost 11.5, ground ball rate of almost 43%. There's a lot to like about Foltynewicz right now. Is this the real Mike Foltynewicz, or are we in for a scary regression coming up?
I mean, I wish I knew the answer to that question. I bet the Braves do too. But I mean, it's never been a question about the stuff. I mean, the stuff has been there, the ability's there. It's just been a matter of, can he put it together and put it all together, take another step forward. So far, he has. He's great in spring. They had that one last scary outing right there at the end of spring where he just got lit up. But, pretty much before that, nobody could score on him. And, he's carried that into the regular season. I think if there's one knock on him right now, he's not pitching deep into games. He only made it 4 2/3 in his last start. He's really piling up the pitches, but he's showing a lot more poise on the mound too. And I think that's one of the biggest things is you're not going to get every call. You're not going to everything's not going to go your way. And I don't think he's always handled that well in the past. And one mistake led to 2 more. And next thing you know, it's a 5-run inning and everything's imploded. So it'll be interesting to see with him. I'm still on a wait and see approach. I don't have a good answer to your question, but man, the stuff's there. I mean, the stuff is there. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, absolutely. But, we're not even out of April yet. But while we have you, we do have to ask on the direction of the club. In terms of the free agent spending, it's been a top 10 payroll early in the 2000s. Now, ever since middle of the pack, you got to think with the new ballpark, they're going to push towards that top 10 if possible. And it seems like, they've gone to Joey Bats here to try to, get that third base okay for now in 2018. But what could we see in the next year or two with the free agents coming out after 2018?
I mean, it's one of those situations where until they spend, nobody's really going to buy into it and believe it. They're set up to spend be major players next offseason. And that's even without really increasing the payroll that much, because they have so much money coming off the books. So, you know, but I mean, I do agree, you know, one of the appealing things of moving to SunTrust Park, you've got the Battery, you've got more revenue producing opportunities than what they had at Turner Field. And you really hope that at some point they start pushing that back into the team and into the roster specifically. They got a good foundation. That was the good part about the rebuild. All these guys are pushing to the majors. The foundation's there. They're just going to have to identify the spots they want to fill in, and they've got the money to do it. And if it's whether it's through free agency or whether it's through cashing in some of that prospect capital, you know, for a free in a trade. So I think they have to. I think they have to. I think I think they owe it to their fan base for kind of enduring this rebuild, because it's been patient. It started out, it was going to be what they thought a 2-year turnaround. Realistically, that just never was. That never was real realistic. So it's going to be. You hate to keep saying wait till next year, but I really do think next year is the year that they. You're going to see them make some capital improvements.
Well, with third base, I'll just follow up on that. With third base being a need, do you think, I know Austin Riley's there, but would you rather the 10-year, $300+ million deal for Machado, or would you rather like a 5-year, 130-ish, maybe a little bit more for Donaldson? That way, because it's tough for me to see the Braves making a 10-year deal as good as Manny Machado is.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, just watching the Braves, I've watched them my whole life. It's hard for me to believe that they would jump up there in that 10-year, and get into one of those crazy contracts for a Machado or even a Bryce Harper, or something like that. But, again, they're going to have the space to do it if they choose to. You feel like SunTrust, you feel pretty good, have to feel pretty good about SunTrust Park, and you have this young base. And I mean, you got to spend at some point, I'm a big Austin Riley fan, but if you've got a chance to get a Josh Donaldson or a Manny Machado, even, I guess you have to explore that, so, and I think that's one reason 2018 is so important, because they've got to make some decisions and decide if these guys can be the core of that next great Braves team. And if they can't, then they've got to go out and fill those holes. So, I think this year is all about deciding, do we need a top of the rotation arm? Do we need a third baseman? Do we need another outfielder? Which the answer is yes in the outfield for sure. So, you have to figure those things out. But yeah, again, to follow up, you've done this rebuild now. You've cleared the salary structure. That was Alex Anthopoulos' first thing. The Matt Kemp trade took on extra salary this year just to open it up for next year. And I think you got to follow through, at this point. Otherwise, why did you go through this rebuild?
Yeah, definitely. Let's talk about the man in charge of the team at the moment, on the field at least, Brian Snitker, who – at the end of last season, it was kind of a 50-50. Was he coming back or not? And, there's been a lot of changes in the last year or so of the upper management, and was this their guy, so on and so forth. There's already been a couple of rocky roads to start this season out with Snitker. What do you think the future is here? Because I'm assuming he might not be the guy to finish this rebuild, but what are they looking at in Atlanta?
Everything's quiet kind of on the Snitker thing. I mean, there's been a couple of bullpen, things that's left us scratching our heads. But I think you can almost say that about a lot of managers. But, I think it's a fair question to say that if John Coppolella and John Hart were still here, would Snitker be the manager today? And I'm not sure of that. I think there was so much upheaval in the front office. Maybe they didn't want to rattle the cage down as the manager level, quite then. So, it's you're always going to wonder. He's not Alex Anthopoulos' guy. He didn't hire him. At some point, Anthopoulos is probably going to want somebody in there. But I do think Snitker's redeeming quality, he's kind of embraced the analytics. He's, we don't know what level. He said all the right things. But the one thing about him, I think the players in that clubhouse like playing for him. and that's that's a redeeming quality. I'm a numbers guy. I like the advanced approach to things, but at the end of the day, there is a human element to this. So they if they're not playing hard and they're not going to play for that guy, I think that's a big responsibility of a manager too. And I think that's where he probably checks the box more so than some of the others. But I mean, if the wheels come off, I wouldn't be surprised to see him replaced at some point. Even like you said, even if it's at the end of the season, because he may not be the guy to finish this rebuild. But I could see him remaining with the organization. He's been here for so long. And I think players like him, and I think he could still be valuable in another area.
Yeah, and they do have. I think they have Walt Weiss as their bench coach, right? So he's former manager of the Rockies. So even if they did fire him, they still have a capable guy there to take over if needed. Yeah, so let's get to whether they're buyers and sellers and what makes them that. 12-10 early in the season, 3.5 back of the Mets. They're right in the wild card race. The only guys that I would see that they would trade in terms of sellers is Markakis, McCarthy, and Kurt Suzuki. Although with that young staff, I wouldn't trade Kurt Suzuki, and I'd like to hear your opinion on that. And then, so do you think eventually, come July 31st, what will they be?
And I mean, if you'd asked me this question before opening day, I would have told you, it's still all about 2019, that they absolutely should have been. But, then when you sit here and you look at this, Jose Bautista move, and that kind of suggests something different. They're kind of kicking the tires. I feel like they're kind of, they probably haven't made their decision yet. This start, it's great. It's been great, but lost in the hoopla of it. There's some warning signs there. Bullpen was a question mark coming in. They didn't really address that this offseason. They were winning a lot of games early. They were walking a lot of guys. And, if you've watched any of this Red series, it's come back to bite them of late. And, if they keep walking people at this rate, it's going to continue to be a problem. So, I think if they look up, they're at the trade deadline and they're still in it. You may see them try to push a piece in and try to get some bullpen help and do anything. But I don't think you're going to see anything just really drastic because, I still think 2019 was the year they kind of circled. That's why they cleared the deck on salary. And I'm not really even, from that standpoint, they took on so much salary this year. I'm not really sure what kind of move they could make. I would think it would have to be a minor addition, even if they do try to strengthen this club. But, I'll throw another name out there. You got all these young arms coming, Julio Teheran.
Yes.
He struggled his first few starts. He's pitched really well last few. If he has a bounce back year, I think we're kind of split on Talking Chop staff as to what they should do with Julio. But that's another name I think you may hear in trade rumors, especially if they fall out of the race. Because they at some point they're going to have to open up some spots in this rotation, and he's still on a very team friendly deal. So, I think that's another name.
Yeah, I like that. I like that thought there with Teheran. I think they possibly could be the 2018 Brewers, where the Brewers last year sort of went for it, but didn't trade any of their pieces till this offseason, which I think would be great for you and all Braves fans.
Yeah, I could see that. And I think it's just the bullpen though has got to stabilize itself because, if the starters aren't going to pitch any deeper than they have been, if this bullpen continues to walk players batters at the rate that they're going now, they're not going to be in contention. So I think at some point they're going to have to address that. Things are going to have to stabilize down there. But who knows? I mean, I feel like the team's going to get better as the year goes along. That was kind of the thing from spring training. They kept some guys. Acuna was down. You've already seen Acuna. At some point, we're going to see Luis Gohara. You may see Mike Soroka. I feel like this team's going to get better as the year goes along. So, it's going to be interesting to watch and see how they navigate those waters if they do look up in July and, here they are in the wild card spot or, within reasonable division, title or whatever.
Great. One last question for you, and we'll send you on your way. we've already talked all the rebuild, all that. Let's just put that to the side for a minute. Chipper Jones is going into the Hall of Fame this year. And I know Mo and we grew up watching Chipper Jones. We've seen him from start to finish. Pretty sure you've seen him from start to finish. And, it's kind of cool seeing guys you could watch your whole life. And this was Mr. Braves. This was TBS to many, many people. Can you just describe to us how important this is to the Braves fandom and how much they're enjoying this, having a guy like Chipper Jones get into the Hall of Fame?
It's been a surreal few years. We've seen Maddox, Glavine, Smoltz, Bobby Cox go in, but I think Chipper's kind of that symbol for everybody,
exactly,
in a lot of ways, because he's the homegrown, he's the homegrown guy. He's kind of the face of the franchise, and when we were doing those Hall of Fame articles and it was getting announced, and you knew he was going to get in on the first ballot. It was just a matter of how many votes, what was the percentage going to be. But, I look back on it now and I'm like, I watch this guy every day. And I think when you do that, sometimes you don't appreciate what you're watching. And, and I look at it now, you look at some of those numbers, you go back and look at some of those moments, and I think, man, that you saw one of the best third basemen of all time. I was privileged enough to grow up in that era and be able to watch it. So, yeah, I think it's big for any Braves fan, especially ones that grew up through the 90s and lived and died with those playoff teams. And Chipper's the face. I think of all the guys there, it probably means more to see him going into Cooperstown than just about anybody else.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, I kind of got that feeling. I just wanted to hear it from a Braves fan's perspective, because it is pretty awesome just as a baseball fan to watch. But Kris, we appreciate you joining us, man. Everybody check him out on Twitter at Kris_Willis, and he's a part of Talking Chop also on Twitter at Talking Chop. Kris, thanks again, man. Much appreciated.
Thank you guys for having me. It was fun.
Thanks,
awesome.
Kris.